The autumn breeze carried whispers of change through Lincoln High's sprawling campus, but nothing could have prepared anyone for what was about to unfold near the old gymnasium. Three figures stood like sentinels of cruelty: Jake, Brandon, and Tyler, their reputations preceding them like storm clouds across the student body. They were the architects of misery, the kind of boys who found pleasure in watching others crumble under the weight of their relentless torment. Jake adjusted his Letterman jacket with practiced arrogance, his eyes scanning the passing students like a predator selecting prey. Brandon cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing off the concrete walls with menacing promise. Tyler leaned against the weathered brick, his smirk already forming as he spotted their next target approaching from across the courtyard. The girl walking toward them moved with an unusual calmness that seemed to part the chaos of the bustling school grounds. Her name was Sophia, though few knew it yet. She had arrived at Lincoln High only 3 weeks prior, carrying with her the quiet dignity of someone who had learned to navigate storms in silence. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her clothes unremarkable, her presence seemingly insignificant to those who judged worth by volume and flash. But appearances, as the three boys were about to discover, could be devastatingly deceiving. Sophia held her textbooks close to her chest, her breathing steady and controlled, despite the familiar tension that always preceded these encounters. She had endured this dance before: the circling, the taunting, the expectation that she would crumble like so many others. What her tormentors didn't know was that silence had been her greatest teacher, and solitude her most faithful companion in developing skills they couldn't begin to comprehend. Her childhood had been forged in discipline and dedication under the watchful eye of her grandfather, a master of ancient fighting arts who had recognized something special in her quiet intensity. While other children played games, Sophia had learned to harness her inner strength through countless hours of training that had sculpted not just her body, but her mind and spirit. The old man had taught her that true power didn't announce itself with noise and bluster. It waited, patient and ready, until the moment demanded its revelation. Jake stepped forward first, his swagger amplified by the audience of students who had begun to gather at a safe distance. The courtyard seemed to hold its breath as he blocked Sophia's path, his shadow falling across her like a threat made manifest. "Well, well," Jake's voice carried the false confidence of someone who had never truly been challenged. "Look what we have here. The mysterious new girl who thinks she's too good to talk to anyone." Brandon moved to flank her left side, his movements clumsy but intimidating to most. "Yeah, we've been watching you, quiet girl, walking around like you're invisible, but we see you." Tyler completed the triangle, his position cutting off any easy escape route. "See, the thing is, nobody gets to be invisible here. Everyone pays their dues, everyone learns their place." Sophia's eyes moved between them with the calm assessment of someone reading a familiar book. She had seen this script played out countless times in her previous schools, always with the same cast of characters wearing different faces. The aggressive leader, the eager follower, the calculating observer, they were as predictable as sunrise. "I'm not looking for trouble," Sophia said quietly, her voice carrying no trace of fear or submission. It was simply a statement of fact. Jake laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "Trouble? Who said anything about trouble? We're just being friendly. Right, guys?" The crowd had grown larger now, students forming a loose circle around the confrontation like witnesses to a ritual they had seen too many times before. Some pulled out phones, already anticipating the humiliation that would follow. Others looked away, grateful they weren't the ones trapped in the center of the storm. Brandon reached out to grab one of Sophia's books, his movements telegraphed and clumsy. "Let's see what kind of stuff the smart girl reads. Bet it's all boring academic garbage." As his fingers made contact with her chemistry textbook, Sophia didn't resist. She simply let him take it, her expression unchanged. This apparent submission seemed to embolden the three boys, their confidence swelling like a tide. "See how easy that was?" Tyler taunted, moving closer. "She's not even going to fight for her own stuff. What a pushover." Jake leaned in until his face was inches from hers, his breath carrying the stale scent of cafeteria food and misplaced superiority. "Here's how this works, new girl. You want your book back. You want to walk through our courtyard. There's a price, and that price is your dignity." The words hung in the air like a challenge to the universe itself. Around them, the crowd shifted restlessly, some students already pulling out phones to record what they assumed would be another victory for the school's self-appointed rulers. But Sophia's response wasn't what anyone expected. She smiled. It wasn't a nervous smile or a placating gesture. It was the kind of smile that spoke of secrets and strength, of knowledge earned through trial and tempered by wisdom. It was the smile of someone who had been underestimated so many times that it had become a familiar comfort. "You want me to pay a price?" she asked, her voice still soft, but carrying a new edge that made several students in the crowd lean forward unconsciously. Jake's bravado flickered for just a moment before reasserting itself. "That's right, and we're going to collect it right here, right now." "All right," Sophia said, setting her remaining books carefully on the ground with deliberate precision. "But first, let me ask you something. Do you know what the difference is between someone who looks weak and someone who chooses to be peaceful?" Brandon snorted. "What kind of question is that?" "You're stalling." Sophia straightened to her full height, and somehow she seemed to grow larger in that moment, though her physical dimensions hadn't changed. The quality of her stillness had shifted from passive to active, from defensive to ready. "The difference," she continued, her voice carrying clearly across the courtyard, "is choice. Peaceful people choose not to use their strength. Weak people don't have strength to use." Tyler laughed nervously. "Yeah? So which one are you, philosophy girl?" Sophia's eyes met his with unwavering directness. "I guess we're about to find out." The change in atmosphere was immediate and palpable. Students who had been chattering fell silent. The casual cruelty that had seemed so certain moments before suddenly felt less inevitable. Even Jake seemed to sense that something fundamental had shifted in the dynamic. "You think you're tough?" Jake demanded, his voice rising to compensate for his growing uncertainty. "You think you can just stand there and intimidate us with your weird Zen act?" "I don't think I'm tough," Sophia replied calmly. "I know what I am. The question is whether you really want to find out." Brandon, perhaps sensing his leader's wavering confidence, decided to escalate. "Enough talk. Let's show this freak what happens to people who don't know their place." He lunged forward with the graceless aggression of someone who had never faced real opposition. His movement was loud, obvious, telegraphed from 3 steps away, exactly the kind of attack that Sophia had learned to read and counter before she could drive a car. What happened next occurred so quickly that many witnesses would later disagree on the exact sequence of events. Brandon's aggressive charge suddenly became an ungainly flight through the air, as Sophia's precisely placed foot sent him tumbling across the pavement. He landed hard, his false confidence scattered like leaves in the wind. The courtyard erupted in gasps and shocked exclamations. Jake and Tyler stared in disbelief as their supposedly invincible companion groaned on the ground, more surprised than truly hurt, but thoroughly humbled. "Brandon!" Tyler shouted, more from shock than concern. Jake's face flushed red with embarrassment and rage. "You little—" He swung wildly at Sophia, his punch carrying all the refined technique of a street brawler, which is to say, none at all. Sophia moved like water, flowing around his attack and responding with a precision that spoke of years of disciplined training. Her palm connected with his solar plexus in a strike that was controlled but effective, dropping him to his knees as he struggled to catch his breath. Tyler, seeing his two companions neutralized with such casual efficiency, found himself frozen between fight and flight. His brain couldn't process how quickly their sure thing had become a disaster. "Your turn," Sophia said quietly, her stance relaxed but ready. Tyler's hands shook as he raised them uncertainly. "This isn't over," he managed to stammer, but his heart wasn't in the threat. "Yes, it is," Sophia replied with finality. "It's been over since you decided to pick on someone you assumed couldn't defend themselves." The crowd had swelled to include nearly 100 students, all witnessing the complete reversal of the established order. Teachers would arrive soon, drawn by the commotion, but for this moment, the courtyard belonged to truth in its purest form. Jake struggled to his feet, his face a mask of humiliation and rage. "This isn't possible. You're just some quiet nobody." Sophia retrieved her books from where Brandon had dropped them, brushing off the dust with careful attention. "You're right about one thing. I am quiet. But you were wrong about everything else." She turned to face the three boys directly, her voice carrying across the silent courtyard with crystal clarity. "You wanted to know who I am. I'm someone who learned that the loudest people are often the weakest. I'm someone who discovered that real strength doesn't need an audience. I'm someone who knows that the most dangerous opponent is the one you never see coming." Brandon had managed to sit up, though he was still shaking his head in confusion. How did I what? How did I refuse to be your victim?" Sophia's voice remained calm, but it carried an authority that none of them had encountered before. "Because I spent years learning that nobody has the right to make me feel small. Nobody has the right to take my dignity, and nobody has the right to hurt others just because they can." The silence stretched across the courtyard like a held breath. Students who had witnessed countless scenes of bullying and humiliation were seeing something entirely new, the complete transformation of victim into victor through skill, preparation, and unshakable inner strength. Tyler found his voice, though it cracked with uncertainty. "We didn't know you could—" "Of course you didn't know," Sophia interrupted gently. "You never bothered to learn anything about me. You just saw what you wanted to see, someone you could hurt without consequences." Jake's face was cycling through emotions like a broken traffic light. Anger, confusion, embarrassment, and something that might have been the first stirring of actual shame. "This doesn't change anything," he said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. "It changes everything," Sophia replied, "because now everyone knows that your power was never real. It was just an illusion that worked as long as people believed in it." She looked around at the crowd of students, many of whom had been victims of these same three boys at various times throughout their school careers. "All of you have seen what just happened here. Three people who seemed so powerful, so untouchable, were defeated by someone they thought was weak. What does that tell you about the nature of real strength?" A murmur ran through the crowd as students began to process not just what they had witnessed, but what it meant for their own lives. Sophia turned back to Jake, Brandon, and Tyler, her expression serious but not unkind. "I don't want to be your enemy. I never did. All I wanted was to walk to class in peace. But you forced this confrontation, and now you've learned something about the danger of assumptions." Jake struggled to reassemble his shattered authority. "You think this makes you special? You think this makes you better than us?" "No," Sophia said simply. "It makes me prepared." "There's a difference." She bent down and picked up Brandon's fallen jacket, brushing it off before handing it back to him. The gesture was small but profound, showing strength without cruelty, victory without vengeance. "My grandfather taught me that the greatest victory is the one that teaches rather than destroys," she said, as Brandon hesitantly accepted his jacket. "Today you learned that quiet doesn't mean weak, Peaceful doesn't mean powerless, and being underestimated can be the greatest advantage of all. The sound of approaching teachers' voices could be heard from across the courtyard, drawn by the crowd and commotion. Students began to disperse, but slowly, reluctant to leave the scene of such a dramatic shift in their school's social ecosystem. Tyler was the first to speak, his voice small and confused. "So, what happens now?" Sophia shouldered her backpack and adjusted her books. "Now, you decide who you want to be tomorrow. You can choose to learn from this, or you can choose to stay exactly who you were before it happened." She looked at each of them in turn, her gaze direct but not unkind. "I hope you choose to learn. Because the world needs fewer bullies and more people who understand that real strength comes from building others up, not tearing them down." With that, she walked away, her steps as measured and calm as they had been when she first entered the courtyard. But now, those steps carried a different weight, not the weight of fear or uncertainty, but the weight of someone who had proven to herself and others that quiet strength could triumph over loud aggression. Behind her, Jake, Brandon, and Tyler stood in the settling dust of their demolished reputations, forced to confront the uncomfortable truth that their reign of casual cruelty had been built on nothing more substantial than their victims' willingness to endure it. The courtyard slowly returned to normal activity, but the memory of what had transpired would linger in the minds of everyone who witnessed it. Students would walk a little taller, knowing that power was not always what it seemed. Teachers would hear whispered stories of the quiet new girl who had changed everything in the span of 5 minutes. And somewhere in the hallways of Lincoln High, Sophia continued her day with the same calm dignity she had always carried, knowing that she had honored the lessons her grandfather had taught her about strength, wisdom, and the courage to stand up for what was right. The autumn breeze still carried whispers of change through the campus, but now those whispers spoke of possibility, of the power that lived in unexpected places, and of the truth that the quietest voice in the room might just be the strongest one of all.